The theme of the presentation today is, I guess, the battlefield that is enterprise mobility, and we're using that theme throughout the presentation. We'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, but we're using that analogy because enterprise mobility is such a hugely changing, dynamic, fast-paced environment, where we're being asked as managers and as IT organizations to really become experts very, very quickly in an awful lot of areas, and make decisions that are going to have very far-reaching consequences, some of them potentially fatal, for our careers, very, very quickly. There are an awful lot of elements to it, whether it be deciding on the device, whether it be deciding on the platform on the device, whether it be deciding what back-end systems to mobilize first, what tool sets to use, what languages to use, and so on and so on. Where to start your business, what to mobilize first. All those things are coming at us really, really quickly. And that involves a huge amount of risk. Hence, I guess, the background theme to our presentation. So we're using, just to change things ever so slightly, a Game of Thrones theme. So you'll have to pardon us and live with us on that. First of all, there's no nudity in this presentation. You'll be very pleased to hear Conor is going to keep his clothes on. There's no audience participation either, so that's probably going to help and make you feel a little bit more relaxed. It's the PG version, if you like, of Game of Thrones. So that's the theme we're going to use. Moving on and getting into it, what we're going to talk about is the tools or the weapons, if you like, that can better equip you as business people and as IT people to win in this battlefield. Okay, so we've particularly chosen 4 weapons of choice, if you like, to do battle and to become the victors and come out the other side. I suppose before we move on, has everyone heard of Game of Thrones? Just kind of a quick show of hands. Has everyone heard of it? Yeah. Okay, that's good. And broadly, do people know what it's about? Show of hands? About 50%. Okay, so the theory is Game of Thrones is about battle, about groups going to battle. And if they pick their strategy correctly, it means they're actually not fighting against each other, they're collaborating, they're working as a team, and they could come out the other side victorious. So that's the theme of our presentation, to look how we can collaborate better from a business and an IT and from an external shareholder perspective in order to win and to maximize the massive opportunity that is enterprise mobility. So, what's the first battle? Conor, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll kick in here. I suppose the format we're going to do here is Joe is House of Business, I'm House of IT, and we'll be sort of setting up these business challenges that the House of Business has to deal with, and hopefully the IT solutions that the House of IT can deliver. Because I suppose traditionally, and I think unfairly, IT can sometimes be seen as a bottleneck. It's the gatekeeper on everything, but the responsibilities of IT are security, data integrity, stability, robustness, all of the important things. So that can sometimes be in opposition traditionally to the requirements of business units saying, I need apps now, I need more apps. So how can we as business people and as IT people work in a way that's agile, collaborative, and actually can deliver these apps quickly without interfering with those important things of stability, security, and so on. So really that's what we're talking about here. So we're going to present, as we call them, 4 key weapons that you can use when you're thinking about or you're going through the mobilization of your enterprise.
Okay. So to get going, as a business person, the first goal for me, I guess, with every decision I need to make is, does it give me greater competitive advantage in the marketplace? How fast will it enable me to move? And does it ultimately move me ahead of my competitors? And as I look at mobility, whether that be for an internal audience, for my staff and employees and my partners, or and to enable me to, I guess, mobilize those business processes, or whether it be externally that I can sell to and service my external customers, I'm looking to see what is it that I can exploit. And an obvious theme there is the consumerization of IT. All of these people, whether they be external or internal, are effectively walking around now like a mini data center. They've got computers in their pockets in the form of phones or tablets. They're wearing them as watches or as headwear, glasses, whatever it might be. There's a massive amount of computing power out there that's turned on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People are continuously accessing it last thing at night, first thing in the morning. And I want to exploit that because I want my employees to be in sync with that and to be able to exploit it. I want my employees to be able to function 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if that's what it takes to be the best, to get that source of competitive advantage. As consumers, we use apps every day. Why? Because they're easy to use, they're intuitive, they're well designed, and I effectively therefore have an audience which is self-trained, self-taught. So what I don't want to do is then to bring them inside my IT or inside my organization, my business organization, and have them have to relearn everything all over again. Okay? So I want to exploit everything that we learn as consumers. I want to be able to build things once and reuse them over and over and over again. So things like, standards like signature capture, geolocation, forms capture, photo, video, all of those things, if they can be used to enhance what have traditionally been paper-based processes, that's fantastic. But I want to be able to do that over and over and over again and get faster and quicker and better as I relay that across all of my processes. So I want all of that, but guess what? I kind of want it now, because that's how fast the industry is changing. That's how fast the market is moving. So how can IT help me?
So we mentioned agility and collaboration. These are two really key bits of doing enterprise mobility projects. And it just says, you want it now. You don't want it in 4 years. So this, I suppose, older view of boiling the ocean, building gigantic monolithic solutions that take forever to get deployed and are out of date by the time they do get deployed, that really has to go away. But again, as I said at the start, talking about IT and IT being very focused on the integrity of, safety of, security of, reliability of the data in the organization, the blood of the organization. How do we do that in a way that works for both? One of the concepts that's become very popular recently, and we've seen it with a lot of our customers, is this idea of two-track IT. It's an idea that accepts the fact that certain parts of IT have to run slow because that's their job. They have to do things at a very cautious, incremental pace to make sure that the business's assets, the business's intellectual assets and data assets are in no way interfered with. So accept that and enable those people to provide access to the data that can be provided access to in a secure way at the rate they want to. But in parallel to that, you run fast IT. And fast IT is where you start getting this agility and this reusability and repeatability. Because if you can expose data internally in the organization and find a way to expose that securely to mobile applications, now you're in a position where business units, subsections of IT, agencies, and many others can actually build these apps at the rate you want to do it. I mean, the whole concept of agile software development is really focused on this idea of having sprints, short sprints. You know, internally in FeedHenry, we run 2-week sprints. So every 2 weeks, we're banging out new features. Sometimes they may only be MVPs, minimal viable product. We're getting a feature out there, we're getting it into people's hands, we're seeing how it's used, and then we're iterating on it. And it's that model that has to become the model for enterprise app development, whereby you get those apps into people's hands as quickly as possible. Later on, we'll be talking in one of our use cases about Network Rail and how they, in fact, built an app in 2 days to deal with a very, very specific challenge that they had. And that's the absolute definition of agile. One of the other things we'll be talking about in a little while is the concept of microservices. And this is where you build lots and lots of small little services inside your backends, inside your mobile backend as a service that can be reused across the organization. So you build your small services once, and then they can be reused everywhere, but they're small, and that's the key thing again. They're not massive, big mobility projects. They're small little services that deliver a specific piece of functionality, and they can be orchestrated together to deliver more and more complex projects and more complex applications. One of the other ways you get agility here is through standard toolkits. More and more what you're seeing in the mobile world is people using hybrid technologies to deliver mobile applications. So that's web technologies, JavaScript, HTML5, CSS, and wrapping those in something like Cordova so they can be delivered easily. But that means you can empower all of the web developers in your organization to build, for example, employee apps. And if you look at the toolkits that they would tend to use, some of the more modern ones, AngularJS, Ionic, and so on, even Bootstrap for styling. All of those web technologies are now becoming mobile first, and that's a really, really interesting change. So mobile is becoming more important for these web frameworks than traditional web, which means it becomes very, very easy then for you to build what are generally considered responsive web technologies and turn them into responsive mobile apps that can connect into back-end systems. One of the other important ones is open source. Open source avoids vendor lock-in. Every single person here, has dealt with vendor lock-in. You've gone down a particular route. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you are locked into that particular stack. By taking an open source approach, not necessarily across the board, but in certain key areas, it means you don't have that lock-in, you're not potentially going down a dead end, you are leveraging the entire ecosystem that surrounds certain open source projects. There's large amounts of community help. I mean, one of the examples we often use in FeedHenry is programming by Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is, for those who don't know, is a programmer's Q&A site. So you literally, any programming question you have on open source technologies is go to Google, how do I with, and the first answer you'll always get is on Stack Overflow, and it's usually the answer you want. And that actually enables particularly internal staff to upskill very, very quickly and get to where they want to be in terms of apps. And what this idea, the microservices, fast IT, open source technology, and open source stack gives you is it's much easier to collaborate then. And it's much easier to collaborate both internally and externally, using agencies, outsourcing, pulling things together. So you're not thinking about just getting away from a monolithic application and our monolithic application stack. You're getting away from monolithic organization. So you have lots of small teams working collaboratively and independently against the same set of back-end APIs and delivering value to the organization and getting that reusability. So you're getting rid of the silos. Finally, back, I suppose, to the open source idea again, and in the realm of, we'll call it IT, and some of the things that IT are concerned about, like configuration management, version control. You can use tools like Git then to give yourself distributed version control. So everybody is versioning what they're doing, but they're working collaboratively and they're working in a distributed fashion. So those are some of the kind of key bits you have to think about if you want to get to that point where you're doing agile app development.
Okay, so what else do I care about as a business person? The one thing I do know is I can't see into the future. but I can certainly learn from what's gone on in the past. And I know that things are going to change. The ecosystem is changing all the time. We only have to look back as recently as yesterday to see that in terms of some of the big announcements that get made quite regularly. And I need to be sure that we can stay at least a pace, if not ahead of that. The other thing that happens is my customers keep asking me for more, and that's not going to change either. So I need to make sure that as a business, we're not placing any bets on something that's going to lock us in and take us down, if you like, a dark alley, to continue the battle theme, so that we have to completely do a U-turn and start afresh. I don't want to get locked into something that's proprietary, expensive, and therefore very, very risky. If we as a business feel that we want to go, just to use a simple example, to go down a native route for mobile applications for our consumers and build very highly polished, very pleasing experiences for our consumers, I don't want that to mean that I can't then choose to go cross-platform and use whatever tool sets are out there from a cross-platform HTML5 and so on point of view to knock out rapid apps for internal use. And I also want to look at the ability for my business people, my business analysts and so on, to build applications without writing any code at all, drag and drop apps. So I want to be able to pick horses for courses, and I don't want to be locked into a situation from which I cannot come back, because I know this is going to change. New devices, new technologies are coming out there all the time. The other area of risk is skill sets. All too often, if we go down a particular tied-in route, the skill sets associated with that just dry up or become very, very expensive, certainly prohibitively expensive. And we've seen that many, many times before. So knowledge of and access to the right skill sets, whether they be from a hiring perspective or whether they be from a contracting onshore or offshore perspective, is very definitely a key consideration. And we only have to look around us today to see why that is.
I'll get back to, I suppose, my hobby horse, which is open. Open delivers on a lot of what Joe has talked about here. But open isn't just about technologies, it's about a mindset, and it's about an approach to how you do your own development. So if you think about building mobile applications that have to talk to back-end systems, they're going to be doing that via something. That something is going to be a set of APIs. It's going to be a system providing a set of APIs. There's going to be SDKs available to you to communicate with those APIs. And if you do that in a particular way, in a very open and flexible way, not open from a, I've let my data be open to the world, but open in terms of your architecture, it means that you don't get the lock-in. It means that one app can be HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS, and the next app can actually be native iOS, and the next app can be native Android. And actually, if you're a .NET house, your next app can be Xamarin. And all of them are talking to the same APIs in the same way using common SDKs, and therefore you can leverage the skill sets across the organization and also target the type of app that you're actually trying to build. So whilst employees' expectations have skyrocketed in terms of what they expect from user experience on an application, it's still a level below what a B2C app, for example, might want. So go native on B2C, get that absolute ultimate in terms of UI and user experience, and get much faster development turnaround by using, for example, hybrid apps. But again, all talking to the same APIs. So you don't actually have to choose. That's, once you take an API-based approach for this kind of thing, you don't have to choose. You can ebb and flow. And as toolkits come and go, you can do that too. So if you were looking at hybrid mobile applications 3 years ago, it would have all been jQuery mobile and Sencha Touch and so on. You look at it now and it's Angular, it's Ionic, it's even people looking at things like Famous, which is a completely different approach to doing things. But you can do that and still you haven't changed your back-end APIs. You're just changing the toolkits that your front-end developers are using, because that's where the excitement is, that's where the buzz is, that's where the energy of the community and the ecosystem is. And we've gone all in on a back-end technology that really drives everything we do. And just for, I suppose, my own knowledge, how many people here have heard of Node.js? So about less than half, maybe. So I'll give a quick introduction as to what it is. Node.js scared a lot of people when it came out because it seemed to be an abomination. It's server-side JavaScript. So it's taking the JavaScript engine that's inside Google Chrome and turning it into a server-side runtime that allows you to write server-side code in JavaScript, which until 2009 most people considered to be a toy language. And yet, since it kind of initially came out 2010 and then really started cranking in terms of functionality and features in 2011, it's taking over the world. It's actually stunning what's happened with Node when it comes to doing server-side development, because it forces the type of mindset I've been talking about on you. It forces you to think in terms of small services being reused, high performance, because people absolutely expect high performance. It's a completely non-blocking architecture, so it's ideally suited to lots and lots of mobile devices trying to connect to a back-end system simultaneously and all getting, a response irrespective of the load on the system. But it's not just the language, because you can make all the criticisms you like of JavaScript versus Java and so on. What's made Node so successful and so popular in the past couple of years is the ecosystem. There are over 70,000 modules that have been created for Node. So if you ever ask yourself, how do I connect to X with Node, SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, Twilio, SendGrid, there's a module there. Somebody's already done the work for you. So it means you can be incredibly productive in what you're doing with your development. And time again, what we are finding is developers who are coming from, particularly from a Java background, initially, obviously very dubious. Java's a real language, JavaScript, what the heck. They suddenly see the efficiencies they get in terms of actually being able to deliver code. They can deliver code faster, more reliably, more responsive, better tested, and much more lightweight in terms of resource usage. So that's gone from a small little internal project in a company called Giant in 2010 to being probably the hot technology of 2014. So NodeConf, which is the European Node Conference, was on in Waterford, where we're actually based, actually this week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. I was there on Monday and I listened to speakers from PayPal, Walmart, I have the list here, Groupon, the Daily Mail, and the Times Educational Supplement, or the technology company around TES. Every single one of those organizations has moved from a monolithic, big, slow, brittle, hard to maintain, hard to upgrade infrastructure to using Node. Now, in most cases, they're not just throwing it all away. They're saying, we can, bit by bit, move our infrastructure to Node. And that's back to what I was talking about microservices. They're building their new services in Node. Those services are talking to the original back-end systems, and bit by bit, they're starting to replace the old infrastructure with Node. So on Black Friday when's Black Friday? September? October? In the US, Walmart switched all of their mobile infrastructure to Node. Their chief mobile architect live blogged it from midnight of Black Friday to tell people exactly what was happening inside his infrastructure. And he was sad to report when it hit 8 a.m., he had no load on his system. The Node infrastructure on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year in the US, it didn't even show a blip. It didn't even notice it was being hammered. So that gives you a sense of what he was able to do with this technology. But in every case, what these guys are able to do is take whether it's Ruby, Java, .NET stack. In TES, it was explained that it was a .NET CMS that was beta in 2001. And they were still using it up until recently. So that's how old, when we talk about legacy systems, that's a 13-year-old system. And they're now replacing it, in this particular case, in its entirety, built from the ground up with Node. And we've gone all in on it. We went all in 2011, which was very early, and it's turned out we were 100% right about it. And it's that concept of, here are my microservices, service, here are my APIs, potentially here's a message bus, if it's that kind of system. And now people can build apps on top of and around this technology in a very lightweight way, in a very fast way, and really, get to where they need to be.
Okay. So we've spoken a number of times already about how we expect our employees to be, able to work from anywhere, using any device at any time. And that's all part of the opportunity that mobile presents to us. But in order to do that, clearly, they need to be able to interact with back-end systems. So that's not just about accessing data on the back end, it's about sending data back to and interacting. It's about doing that with multiple different systems potentially at the same time, and therefore creating a mashup, if you like, of data coming maybe from a CRM, from an ERP, from a workflow and so on, in order to truly be productive. Why? Because I want people to be able to react to opportunities as they present themselves. I want my sales organizations using iPads or tablet devices potentially to be able to showcase their products and services really, really well, to be able to register leads and log leads if that's the appropriate thing to do, but also to be able to actually close deals if that's the things to do. I want to be able to sign people up using signature capture, take payment. All of those things require integration, interaction with multiple back-end systems at the same time. So it's not point to point. As we move on in time, I want to be able to reuse that over and over again. So we have an example, for example, of the Road Safety Authority in Ireland, who started with fundamentally transforming their core business, which is the issuing of driver licenses, which obviously traditionally the driving test is a paper-based process. Where the tester sits beside you in the car and so on and fills it in. They moved the whole way through from the application process online, taking that, building an MBAAS lightweight to enable the more efficient application process, through to the test itself is now done on a tablet device. Results are in real time, integrated to an old SOA back-end system. The reporting and analytics, the monitoring, the health and safety and so on, everything is completely now done, but they didn't do it all in one go. It was done in iterative steps. That ecosystem is now in place and therefore can be reused. So other stakeholders who want to access the same data, for example, a police force, for example, clearly there's key information there that can be shared across public sector entities. And that's a very easy next iterative step to make. So it's a sensible case of doing something small, tangible, doing it well, but doing it in a way that it can be scaled and reused over and over again. And that's they're the type of projects that we're involved in all the time. So I guess what I'm saying is, what we want is, as a business, is to learn from what happened with the web. Okay, so we know we've got old, clunky, in some cases, legacy back-end systems, as well as some newer ones. And we've been down this road before. For the web, we know that they needed to be web-enabled. And we know the pain and suffering that we went through to do that. We don't have the advantage of that time anymore. I know that we're not going to be able to wait 5 years to to mobile enable our entire back end. So I want an approach that's much faster, much more lightweight, and much more flexible, so that I can start with something small and scale, frankly, get the return on investment and the value from it. We do not have a 5-year window to wait for this stuff. It's happening now.
So I suppose we have two things here, MBAAS and APIs, just for those of you who mightn't be familiar. So MBAAS, industry buzzword, mobile backend as a service. You'll hear MPaaS, mobile platform as a service. But fundamentally what it is a system you place between your existing enterprise systems and your mobile devices to deal with mobility. So it means you don't have to go and rewrite all of your existing systems. You can put an MBAAS and all of the supporting material around an MBAAS in front of that, and we'll talk about deployment in a few minutes as to how you might actually deploy that. And then provide facilities to mobile. And really the key is you're taking potentially megabytes of data from a range of systems, doing something with that data, mashing it up, taking data both from internal systems and external systems, and generating a data stream that's probably more like kilobytes and in JSON format over the wire to your mobile device. So that one job is incredibly important, but what it does is it enables you to do that two-track IT. Your existing systems can stay as they are, doing what they've always done reliably at the performance level to which they have become accustomed. And you can mobilize at the same time. So your MBAAS gives you things like caching for performance. So every request from your mobile device isn't hitting your back-end system. It's cached where it's appropriate. Staging of data into a NoSQL database. So you've got flexible data models inside the MBAAS talking to potentially quite inflexible data models in the back end, mashing them together, and again making them available in a high-performance way to the mobile to mobile devices. Another critical one, particularly given the case studies we're going to give you in a minute, is offline behavior. So that you can do a synchronization of data to your device, go out, go down a tunnel, and work. Use that data, submit new data, come out, and synchronize back to the back-end system, and everybody's happy. All of the data is consistent, it's reliable, and it has been staged correctly in both directions. And that's really key. Sometimes when we talk about back-end system integrations, we're talking about pulling data out, but equally important from a mobile workforce perspective is actually pushing the data back in. And one of the things an MBAAS can give you, I mentioned it already about microservices, is reusable services. And again, so IT can take a system that they have, let's say an SAP ERP system. They don't have to mobilize the entire system. They don't have to make all of that data available. They can build a microservice inside the MBAAS that just provides access to the data they want to provide, can have protected credentials, so you're not handing out your SAP credentials to every developer who is building a mobile application, and then present out a documented auto-discovered API internally that every app developer inside your organization with the right permissions can then build against. So they don't need to know anything about your SAP. They just need to know, well, actually this ERP data is available to me. It's available with these credentials, so it is locked down securely. As a developer, I'm a front-end developer. I only need to know this. I don't need to know any of the rest of it. I can focus on my concerns. IT can focus on their concerns. And actually, we can build 10 apps. IT has done one job. They've exposed that data via a small service inside the MBAAS, high performance, and now all of these apps can build against it, and the SAP system hasn't changed at all. So it's that kind of approach that an MBAAS gives you. And once you have that, once you have those APIs, then you can monitor them, you can meter them, you can check your performance, you can make sure that you have uptime, what that uptime is, and by taking certain approaches, there's certain API documentation approaches you can use, like API Blueprint, RAML, Swagger, and so on. You can expose those APIs in a discoverable and documentable way, so it's consistent to everybody across the organization. So what you get there is collaboration, and collaboration in an outsourced sense as well, and also it avoids, as I said at the start, the boiling of the ocean. It's not, we have to mobilize our entire enterprise and now we have a mobile app. It's, we've mobilized this piece here because this is the first thing we want to mobilize, and now we have 5 apps actually using this piece of data, and now we can build out from that. Yeah, I think that's for me.
Okay, so switching back to a user and a business owner, manager viewpoint, if I think again about how our lives have been transformed from a private perspective by mobile and by, I guess, the as-a-service type offerings. I stopped going to Blockbusters, I don't know how many years ago, because of Netflix and services like it. I've stopped buying CDs because of Spotify. I've thrown out all those clunky, hard to use, ugly looking boxes around my room or around the house because of Dropbox. I consume 90% of my news, certainly not from print. So it has, mobile and cloud have completely and utterly transformed my life, certainly, and in terms of how I make my buying decisions and inform myself and so on. So the question is, as a business user, how can I apply that logic to my business? Why did I make those decisions myself? Clearly because everything is now cheaper, faster, quicker, and generally better. They're better. So why can I not just apply that logic to my business and start making much more of the utilities that we use as a service? I know, however, that one size does not fit all, and that it's a complex decision to migrate to the cloud and to start to embrace cloud-based services. So there's some decisions we need to go through there, and I understand that security, authentication are key considerations that need to be borne in mind. But it is a key goal for me to get there.
Yeah, just picking up on Joe's point there, I think when a lot of people hear cloud, they immediately think public cloud, Amazon, Azure, done, that's it, that's all the cloud is. Whereas our experience dealing with customers over the past few years is cloud means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And not in a kind of a cloud washing sense, but more, yes, there's public cloud, but there's also private cloud. There's completely on-premise, there's hybrid cloud scenarios, you've got VPCs, you can burst out infrastructure into Amazon if you wish. So there's lots of different ways of doing this. And different ones are appropriate to different types of businesses, whether you're B2B, B2C, but particularly in the extreme, we call it non-public cloud sense, B2G, where you're building apps either, let's say, for police force, or you're building apps that allow people to check their social welfare benefits. That's not something you're going to be putting in Amazon public cloud. That's something that's going to be very, very locked down, but you still need to be able to mobilize it. So you need to be able to have a mobility solution that can work in any of these scenarios, from it's Amazon, it's fine, we're done and dusted, to, well, actually it's going to be a 6-month effort to do a fully private on-premise deploy. So there's a lot of things to think about there. Just even you think security, then you're looking at VPNs, ports, firewalls, IP punch through. I mean, we have had an example recently, a large American customer. They need to get their JMS accessible to mobile apps. And how do they do that? And how do we connect our MBAAS that's specific to them to a JMS in a safe and secure way? Now, that took effort. It wasn't a one-click deploy, because we're dealing with security, IT teams, security teams, policies, and so on. But once it's done, and then all of the apps that they can build can make reuse of what they've done there. So I think the idea that you've kind of got one-click deploy to the cloud, it can happen, but you really have to think you've got automated deployment, and then you've got specific configuration for your policies and your needs. And it's the duality of that. It's the necessity for really DevOps, that it can't just be a flick a switch type deployment for a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses who are not in public cloud, that they need a lot more configurability than that. And that's where you need that flexible cloud deployment, as you can see here. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of ground in the last 40 minutes or so. We've introduced, I guess, what we believe are 4 of the main weapons that will equip us as business people and as IT people to, I guess, take on the battle that is enterprise mobility, to try and understand better some of the challenges, mitigate risk, and come out the other side alive, I guess.
So we've covered quite a bit of ground, and I think now is a good time. The next phase of the presentation is to talk about a couple of use cases, a couple of case studies and customers and so on. But now is probably a good time to pause for thought and sort of say, have we lost anybody? Is there any questions? Anything anybody'd like to talk about?
I'll ask a question if you don't mind.
Yes, sure, Nick.
Thanks, Joe. Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. Really good presentation. One of the questions I guess I have taken a step back is your experience. Obviously, you are offering a very comprehensive architectural approach to solving customers' challenges with deploying applications and building applications. How do you see most of your customers over here today in terms of where do they start? And what is the starting point that you typically find with customers today around applications? Do they want to build one app and then they come to you? Or is it much more, are they more now thinking, okay, to your point earlier, this is a 3 to 5 year thing for me, so I need to really get the architecture right from the beginning. I'm just curious to get your flavor in terms of maturity levels.
Okay. Will I have a go? So I'll have a go at that. I think there's very definitely a maturity curve there. It's a very clear curve. It's a very clear journey that enterprises go on. And I think you're right. I think it does start with the first app. Over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, we've dealt with a lot of, in some cases, surprisingly very large organizations who've been stuck with that first step. Grappling with, okay, so what does my first app need to look like? What technologies? Should it be native? Should it be cross-platform? And that was hard and difficult for them because it was new, because at the same time they were trying to make decisions on devices and MDM and security and authentication and so on. And that was kind of an app view of the world. But those organizations have now come through that and are very much actually realizing, do you know what, it's not about the app. It's about us as an organization equipping ourselves to embrace mobility. We're on a mobility journey here to try and become a mobile-first organization. And we need horses for courses. We need skill sets associated with design and good user experience on the device side, certainly. But actually, we have a huge amount of work to do on the back end to enable these guys to be innovative and flexible to do their thing and make sure that there is a seamless, beautiful experience on the client side. There's an awful lot of heavy lifting to be done on the back end for systems that were built many, many years ago, not even for web and certainly not for mobile. So we feel that the bulk of the larger organizations now, whether it be a B2B or a B2C journey they're on, are now starting to really understand the complexity of mobilizing multiple back-end systems to build multiple, and that could mean hundreds, of apps on the client side. And that's taken them very definitely on a trajectory toward becoming mobile-first organization.
This is directly related.
I think we need to, I'm going to have to wait for the...
Sorry.
Thank you.
This is a directly related question, and we've mentioned it several times in the presentation, and the questions addressed it as well. Enabling an enterprise mobile workforce is only as good as the access to the back office systems you give them. And that means you have to atomize a significant business process. You're not going to put logistics warehouse management on an iPhone, but you might use an iPhone to check stock or something of that description. And that requires business process re-engineering, and that is not an insignificant task. And without business process re-engineering, you have no strategy whatsoever for mobility. Do you guys help with that task, or do you obviate that to a McKinsey or an Accenture or a Deloitte or a consulting organization, or do you assume that the enterprise already has that in hand?
Okay, so there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, I agree, absolutely. For organizations to truly embrace what mobile is about, you need to step away from the app for a second and look at the end-to-end business process. Totally agreed. And similarly, in the cases as that learning experience and that journey, for the enterprise, I think a lot of the consulting companies, the systems integrators, the strategic thinkers out there, if you like, are on the same journey and are now much better equipped. I wouldn't say the same 3 years ago. Today, much better equipped, and that skill set and that help is out there. So we partner with a lot of those types of companies, whether it be the big systems integrators globally to help with big global customers, or whether it be more local niche boutique providers. They're starting to pop up, and some of them are obviously better than others. But our preference is to let those guys do that work, and for us to do the bit that we're best equipped to do, which is really to solve those hard technical challenges associated with where mobile meets back end. That's what we're very, very good at. Now, if you twist my arm and ask me to build an app, I'm sure we'll do that for you, but there's plenty of people out there who can do that. There aren't that many, unfortunately, who've really solved this heavy lifting piece. Would you add to that, Conor?
No, I think that's...
Okay. All right. So we thought it would be poor form to stick with the theory side, and we decided to bring along some practice as well. So some customers that we've worked with, and we've just picked 3, but we'll probably name check a few more. The 3 are the Kier Group, Network Rail, who you'll all be very familiar with, and DAA, Dublin Airport Authority. So just by introduction, Kier Group are a very, very successful and high-profile organisation here in the UK in particular, 1.7 billion PLC, with, I think it's 16 or 17,000 staff, the vast majority of whom are in the field, they're operational, and so on. For them, enterprise mobility represents an enormous opportunity to literally transform many of their core business processes. They're very strong in the areas of utilities, infrastructure, sewerage, transport. So they touch all of the things that, keep the country moving, really, and keep the country ticking over. Heavily regulated in many respects, so lots and lots of paper, lots and lots of regs and audits, inspections that need to be carried out, but also need to be proven to be carried out and need to be accessible over long periods of time. We've worked with Kier for the last 2 or 3 years through various iterations, and we see them as being very forward-thinking in terms of embracing technology and bringing it to their client base.
Yeah, I suppose Kier, we talked a bit about moving people from kind of paper-based approaches, and actually when we get onto Network Rail, we'll go back to that. But in Kier's case, because they see the value in technology, they have been going at this for quite a while. Unfortunately, the way they were going at it up until the newer solution came along was the classic ruggedized mobile device, so Windows Phone 6.5 or whatever it is. And the general feedback from the field was they detested them. They absolutely hated them. These are people coming into work with an iPhone and a Galaxy S4, and then they were given something like this to actually do their job on. It was complete, cognitive dissonance. And I mean, some of the quotes there, this is harder than paper, which really tells you everything you need to know about that approach. But these are very, very common. We run into them all the time. And it was very much, we won't say a technology dead end, but if you're on Windows ruggedized 6.5, the chances are you're not jumping to Windows Phone 8 or Windows Phone 8.1. You're probably going to jump to something like Android, which leaves them behind and leaves you in a bit of a bind as to what approach to take. So they made the decision that they had to go with a much more open approach and use the types of open technologies that we provide, so that they could deliver something that their employees would actually like to use, still provide the same or more functionality, but do it in a way that brings it bang up to date and allows them to keep iterating and keep developing on that. Can you just click on there? So this is where they got to, and interestingly enough, in 2 of our use cases here, they actually brought the users in. So you can see it's not a case of we rebuilt it to be Windows Phone 8, here you go, or Android, here you go, you're done. It's very much, well, what do you need? What works for you? What are your expectations in terms of user experience, user interface, and so on? So it was a complete move. I mean, it feels like a decades type move from one to the other. And these new approaches that they have now are absolutely beloved by the employees because it completely fits with what they're already doing. I mean, these act and behave like all of the types of consumer apps they already have on their phones, and leverage all of the newer hardware technologies that are inside the device to deliver a much better experience then for the business in terms of what they can do, responsiveness and so on. On to the next one there.
So Network Rail require no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. Well, a quick one. 35,000 staff, 22,000 of which are mobile, are out in the field or are operational. And think about where they could be working. Certainly in very rural locations where there's either an edge network or no network at all, or even underground. Many of them spend long periods of time, days underground working. So being able to work offline and use mobile underground and offline is a key requirement for them. The core KPIs for Network Rail are twofold. One, from an SLA perspective, keeping the country moving and making sure that the infrastructure and the asset management is first class. Secondly, reducing fatalities and injuries on the network. There are two reasons for being as such. Most of you will have heard by now of the Orbis program that they launched a number of years ago, which has got three elements to it. One is it revolves around asset management. Fundamentally, they're an asset management company, and that requires excellent inspection and management and maintenance of core assets for the country. The second one is about their people, to understand where their people, as their second main asset, the people, where are people located, what are the skill sets that they have, and how can you optimally manage those two things, your infrastructure and your people, to make sure that you're best in class. And where they want to get to is away from a reactive, fixing things mentality into a predictive, understanding things that could go wrong before they go wrong and preventing that. So nothing could be more critical than having mobile technology, data flowing in a two-way direction from multiple hundreds of back-end systems to multiple tens of thousands of mobile devices in real time. Guess what? That's hard and very complicated. Think about folks who work underground for an entire day, capturing data which could include video, high definition photos and so on, who come above ground onto an edge network and start to synchronize with multiple back-end systems, move from edge to 2G to 3G to 4G, back to offline again, and the control and the management of that data. That's the level of complexity that they needed when they went to market a number of years ago to select a strategic partner, a strategic vendor in this space. I'm pleased to say, obviously, that they made the right decision in the end and picked FeedHenry.
Yeah, so similar to Kier, when it came to apps as such, I mean, you've got infrastructure and the strategic view that we need to put in a mobile platform that delivers potentially the functionality to potentially hundreds of apps over the space of a couple of years. So we're not talking 1 or 2 or 10, hundreds of apps, but all accessing via the same mobile backend as a service, mobile application platform. But when it came to the actual apps themselves, they obviously went to all of the users out there and said, give us ideas, tell us actually what you'd like, ignoring these are the enterprise requirements that we have. What do you as employees, what would make your lives easier, what would benefit the organization? And they effectively had an internal competition, had many apps suggested, they had winners, and then the interesting bit is they took that agile approach where they built very quick prototypes to see which would work, which wouldn't, and many fell away quite quickly, but then they ended up with a core set of really useful, beneficial apps both to the business and to the users that they could then iterate out to be to be full-scale apps. But it is quite shocking when you think of a company of that scale, how much you can save just by replacing paper. I mean, it's savings of 5 million per annum. And that's not, just the fact that there's a whole paper-based process that you're getting rid of there. Some of the things we were told about were things like they would get paper back, but it was raining when it was written on. So a person would actually have to go back out and redo the work that somebody else had done in terms of reporting on a problem. I mean, that from an efficiency point of view, that's a disaster. That gets rid of all of that app. It completely deals with online, offline, so there's no issues there. But also by making use of things like forms-based applications, which are zero code, they can generate a lot of disposable apps for specific projects in specific areas, where it's data reporting, it's data collection and data reporting. It might only be for a 2-week period, and then they can move on. This one here, battery life inspection, again, replacing older systems, older processes. These are batteries along the railway tracks and so on. Immediate benefit, and complex from a systems point of view, from an infrastructure point of view, but not a complex app from a user perspective, which is really what you're trying to achieve. But this is the one that the incident flood warning app is the one that particularly jumps out at me. So this is the app that was done in 2 days. I believe there was a little bit of rain here over the past 12 months where things went slightly pear-shaped in the UK. But what happened was obviously a lot of railway infrastructure got flooded as well. And people needed information, they needed it fast, they needed it accurate, and there's no way a paper-based system is going to work. So in 48 hours, they built a very, very quick mobile application built on top of the FeedHenry platform that enabled them to send out swathes of people to investigate exactly where all the flooding was, report exactly back where it was, collate that information, and it enabled the CEO to go and say to government, this is exactly where we're at. Go and talk to the press and say this is exactly where we're at with flooding, and know that information is bang up to date and is being constantly updated by people in the field, and has no transcription errors or any of the types of things you'd normally expect from an older system. But it's not just the utility of such an app, it's the fact that you could do one in 48 hours, so you can immediately deal with a situation, build an app and get it out there and get it onto devices that quickly.
So this is our final use case. It's the DAA. It's the Dublin Airport Authority. Some of you may have heard of them, but really their role is they're an international airport management company. So they manage infrastructure and assets in the States, the United States, in the Middle East, as well as in Ireland. They run Dublin Airport and Cork Airport, or they own Dublin Airport and Cork Airport. So their concern is quite complicated, really. Because if you think about the ecosystem of an airport, it's actually like a small town in many respects. It's got its own police force, it's got its own retail area, it's got transport and so on and so forth. It's actually the biggest bus station in most countries is the airport. So in their case, they needed to concern themselves clearly, first of all, with the passengers and to make sure that there's an enhanced passenger experience. Things like using geo, using location, using virtual reality, a shopping experience, so there's an m-commerce experience in the application. And it's a fully native, very glossy, best-of-breed app, which helps somebody either get to the airport or come into the airport and find their way out the other side in terms of bus tickets, train tickets, times tables, and all that kind of good stuff. It's a full-service passenger application. But guess what? They've got lots of other concerns as well. They've got real-time, you need to connect with real-time data. You've got to look after internal staff, so incident response, floor walkers, a police force, and so on and so forth. So they needed an application that could, or a partner, a platform if you like, that could sit across their multiple back-end systems, many of them legacy, security a huge concern clearly in an airport, to enable, as I said earlier on one side, a very visual, consumer-facing, fully native, all-singing application, and on the other extreme, actually zero-code app form. The ability for their police force, their audit teams, the inspections, their cleaning staff, to knock out mobile application versions of all of the paper that exists within an airport within a day, within a couple of hours in many cases. So from their perspective, they chose a partner who could help them to do that and to take it in bite-sized steps.
Yeah, I think Joe covered most of it there, but it's an interesting one in the sense that generally, with a lot of our examples, it's B2E or it's B2C or it's B2B. In their particular case, it's a single back-end system, it's a single mobile application platform talking to multiple back-end systems, but generating multiple types of apps. So, very rich, lovely B2C app, and then equally, I mentioned disposable apps before. They're generating disposable apps. They're generating very simple no-code apps that the business analysts can actually generate for them rather than technical people generating them. But once they had the mobile application platform in place, they built their services, their microservices to connect to their legacy back-end systems. They now have something that can deliver app after app simply based on the business requirements that they have at a particular point in time.
Okay, so I think that closes it for us. I don't know if we have time for any Q&A or if there is Q&A.
We're a little bit over, but we can handle a quick question if anyone has any final questions or burning issues.
Okay, so all that remains then is to say thank you, Nick, and thank you for your attention. To continue the Game of Thrones theme, I think we do have as many as maybe 3 or 4 T-shirts back at the stand. If anybody wishes to come along and have a chat with us and have a look at the platform and look in a little bit more detail, we do have some T-shirt giveaways for you Game of Thrones fans, and we promise not to be too scary or frightening. So thank you very much.